ではお待たせいたしました。
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for waiting. We will go to panel discussion 3. The theme is what conditions are needed to launch infrastructure investment in Japan. So please welcome the panelists with a big round of applause, please. Please be seated. Thank you for coming. And from this point onward, I will ask Mr. Keiji Hattori to oversee the proceeding of this discussion. Mr. Hattori, please. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What are the conditions to enable infrastructure investment in Japan? That's the theme. I am going to be the moderator of this panel discussion. I am Keiji Hattori of 6th Street. Pleased to meet you all. Thank you very much. I will introduce myself. I belong to the 6th Street Investment Fund, U.S. Investment Fund from December last year, and I am working on the launching of Japanese juridical person. 6th Street has the assets under management to the tune of $135 billion, in other words, over 20 trillion yen, and it is the focus of attention by a lot of investors because of the growth and the profit. But it is not well recognized in Japan, so I hope that I will do the PR work of my company. So sports investment is something that we have worked earlier, and we have more than 30 projects, data center, alternative energy, and social infrastructure. I am involved with the infrastructure investment. Like in the former company that I worked, it is well known overseas and yet not recognized in Japan. I am participating in such an investment firm to propagate the need for infrastructure investment. I will add one. Mr. Ono is case in point, one of the panelists. You see, we have our thought and we have our intuition. So how the actual outcome can be formed with the combination of ambition, thoughts, and the experience. So this is we are the samurai in the field of infrastructure investment. Sorry for digressing from my theme. Now, today's panel discussion. Before starting this panel discussion, once again, we would like to consider what is meant by infrastructure investment. This is not only about a physical facility and equipment. It covers traffic and transportation network like roads and railways and airports, as well as the energy, power, gas, and the optical fiber and information and telecommunication infrastructure. They are the backbone necessary for our daily lives. And that is what infrastructure investment is all about. As you know, in Japan, infrastructure is faced with a very big turning point. First of all, the facilities were worked during the high economic growth period, and a lot of infrastructure is aging. It is a problem. Then, together with the digitalization, the sophistication of communication is happening, and data center is increased. And together with that, we have big power demand. And then we need the increasing alternative energy looking toward decarbonized society. So we have those challenges, and the fund's needs are going to grow larger and larger. There is a limit to what a fiscal fund can come about. Especially aging is a serious problem. Last year in Yasuhiro city, the water supply pipe ruptured. The road had a big hole, and even it led into the fatal accident. It's a very tragic accident. So no time to be wasted to look after the upgrading of infrastructure. So how do we have the takeoff of infrastructure investment? In other words, how can we entice the money of overseas and domestic institutional investors so that we can build a sustainable infrastructure. So we have the practitioners who are having daily battles. They are the panelists, so I'd like to hear their views. First of all, from the financial point of work, infrastructure was worked by Mr. Yasuhiro Ono for many years. He was with the Mitsubishi Corporation, and he was consistently working on investment, and he was on the screening side of infrastructure fund of the world at the Japan Postal Bank. And also, he is the Japanese representative of Stonepeak, which is one of the large infrastructure investment funds of the world. So he is the real samurai in the field of this particular topic. Next one is Ms. Kayo Ito. She was born in Canada, and she grew up overseas. She joined the NTT as a new graduate, and she worked in many Western branches and organizations, and she is now the representative director and president of NTT Limited, which is the data group company of NTT. She was involved with for many years the international networking business of NTT. Next person is Mr. Yusuke Toyoda, who is the representative director and president of Digital Grid. He joined Goldman Sachs from the graduate school of Tokyo University, and then he went through private equity funds occupations, and in 2018 he started a Digital Grid, and he looked into the IPO of this. So he had a specific research to finance to forming a company. So he has a consistent career path, a very rare entrepreneur. So he can talk about the theme of today, speaking from his own experience. Now, I would like to turn to you. Please introduce your business, and please express your thought about today's theme. So please. Ono speaking, as was introduced. I belong to one of the large infrastructure investment fund. The 15 trillion yen was the asset under management when I joined, but we are going to invest in Asian countries. I've worked on that. Stonepeak itself, the investors to this fund is Washington State Pension Fund or Oregon Public Pension Fund. Public pension funds invest in our company, and it is being invested into infrastructure of across the world. Deepstone itself is a Japan team of Peakstone spinning out. So we became independent, and we created this company. What we do is not different from Peakstone's. Today's theme: how do we entice overseas funds into the Japanese infrastructure? I think that is the theme of this discussion. At the time of my working at the Stonepeak, there is one episode that I'd like to talk about. Asia Infrastructure Fund of Stonepeak was launched by us about 500 billion yen scale. 70% overseas investors want to invest in Japan. We talk about Asia, but the highest quality of infrastructure and service level is so high in Japan, so they want to invest in Japan. 500 billion, so 350 billion yen was the amount of fund which wanted to come to Japan. But as a result, while I was working in Stone Peak, it was about 100 billion yen of investment that I handled. The 50 billion yen less was the amount invested in Asian infrastructure. Viewed from overseas investors, they want to invest in Japanese infrastructure. They have a high level of expectation. But as a matter of fact, it doesn't reach the infrastructure in Japan. That is a big riddle. So it's the enigma. As I enter this topic, I am showing you this slide. I am talking about infrastructure fund. Actually, they are more or less a new kind of funds. The time horizon, very difficult to see, but the starting point of time horizon is 2010. From around the Lehman crisis until 2025. That's the horizontal axis, how the infrastructure fund grew in the world. This is the graph. Honestly speaking, before 2010, it was non-existent. Scale was negligible, but rapidly in the last 15 years, the market size grew. As of now, about 200 trillion yen worth of infrastructure fund is being formed. So in Europe, US, and the Asian regions, these are the places, but it doesn't show in this graph. But Japan is at a very low level. It's close to the horizontal axis. So you see, the infrastructure fund has a lot of money, but it is not being invested in Japan at all. Other 2 points I'd like to talk about. As a matter of fact, as I noted here, airport, expressway, these are owned by the government. So they would be privatized, and that is the beginning of the infrastructure funds. But as I note, data centers or renewable energies or large-scale battery, they are the growth area, and this is where money is going, and it is leading the industry growth. The last point I would like to talk about. In Japan, fund and operational companies are confrontational against one another. That is the conventional way. But actually, the fund can grow. Fund has grown running alongside the operational industrial companies, especially in the case of infrastructure. Operational companies have to have a very heavy asset. Otherwise, they cannot have the operations. But in the case of public companies, they have the downward pressure regarding stock prices. So the asset light would be the situation where the operation is carried out. So we grew together with the actual industrial companies. Thank you very much. Sorry for being lengthy.
対立している事業会社のNTT になるんですけれども、はい。
NTT, which is competing with the previous company. NTT Limited Japan is what it states here. NTT Group's data center network, basic infrastructure. Other than Japan, we're doing global business and Limited Japan, NTT Limited Japan, subsea cables is a large part of my business. That's what I'm responsible for. As the previous speaker has mentioned, and I'm sure you've been discussing this all day, data center, AI demand, and I think there has been a lot of talk about the AI, and you read that in the newspapers. But the infrastructure, the network is also very important. We're an island nation here in Japan, and so in communicating with overseas, you think of Starlink or satellites. How many think we use satellite or Starlink for communicating with overseas? So please raise your hand. And so that's the result. 99% are such that we use subsea cables, and that's where the traffic goes. So large infrastructure, asset-heavy infrastructure is an area which is very important in the operations of a nation. As for Japan, this is the strength. First is location. Japan is such that it's in between Asia and the Western countries. And so when we think about traffic, if you think about airplanes, it's the same thing. You land in Haneda once, and then you go to China or to Singapore or to Asia. Traffic is pretty much the same. You land in Japan, and then you go to other places in Asia. It has a hub function. So going forward, we need to keep that. And I think this is a very important role that Japan ought to play. There are political risks which are found less here in Japan, and so that's very important as well. And traffic is such that AI demand is growing. And SDR is growing at about 15% annually. So you need to continue to make investments. And the strength of Japan's infrastructure, I'd like to talk about this. We, in various places, we install networks, but Japanese infrastructure is really outstanding. Japan's network availability, what is the percentage, people ask? And we say 99.999%. In India, it's 99.5%. And so what this figure is that 99.5%, that is only interrupted 5 minutes a week. 99.5%, that's 12 days a year where it's interrupted. 2 weekdays where the network is interrupted. So that's the difference between India and Japan. And that's basically a major difference. And so as Mr. Hattori has mentioned earlier, it's been 30 years since Internet emerged, and it's about time we change the infrastructure. And this is another opportunity because we need to replace the infrastructure. So we hope to discuss, I hope to discuss more on these points. Thank you.
改めましてデジタルグリッド
TOYODA of Digital Grid, thank you for having me. Ito-san mentioned data center and cable communications. We are in charge of power in terms of infrastructure, which is inseparable from data centers. So that's our mainstream business. Very briefly, let me introduce myself. As Hattori-san already introduced, let me explain to you what I did research on in college. Infra power generation assets were already there, and they were gigantic. There were many historical turning points in the sector of power, but March 11th, the Fukushima Daiichi and the Democratic Party of Japan was the ruling party, and they began to invest in renewables. So that is the 15-year history. Bullet train. You see different landscapes from the window 15 years ago and now, and there are criticisms against solar panels, but there have been much investment in renewables. So infra format has changed. In a world of distributed power, pre-war and post-war era, there was gigantic infrastructure built, but we need more distributed infrastructure. So that was the theme of my research in university. More specifically, as indicated in this chart, power companies used to sell power. That was the conventional business. But you can purchase power from your neighbor, and distributed power system is local production and local consumption. That's ideal. You talked about submarine cables, but in the future, with increased number of data centers, you want to have the power source in proximity to the data center. So that's the watt-bit proximity, which is being talked about by NTT Data and I1 Vision. So we want to offer power, trying to approach that kind of ideal landscape. 1 gigawatt, 1 nuclear power generation is the capacity we currently have. It's still very small, but we hope that the capacity increases. So the point I wish to convey with you today is to talk about our dream. When we think about Japanese infrastructure and in power, there's much room for dreaming about the future. This is a slide that changed my life, and I encountered this picture in my college days. And the chart describes the size of joules, in other words, power. The top 4 are what disappears after consumption, like crude and gas. But if you look at the bottom section, 200-fold of energy potential exists against the consumption in the world. If this is made available, then if we invest in this area, energy can be used, marginal cost can be minimized. If such energy becomes available, of course, there are many challenges as we try to leverage such potential, but I hope to talk about that.
早速メインテーマ
Now, without further ado, we will go to the main theme. Having listened to the remarks, Ms. Ito talked about the technological superiority, the continuation of optical fiber functioning. That's the superiority. So demand could explode in the future. The strength in the business, how do you grasp this opportunity? And how are you focusing your attention to this possible area? Can you talk about that possibility? Ito-san, we'll start from Ito-san.
Yes, AI demand. That is pushing everything. That's the driver. And that's how things stand at the moment. To underpin that and to invest that is something that we have to do. Otherwise, Japan will not be able to keep up in the competition. It will see its competitiveness wane. And so there are difficult points, there are different challenges, power and resources, water and location, data centers. Have to consider that. When it comes to subsea cables, you have to invest properly. And how do we finance that? How do we collect the money to do this? Subsea cables, in the case of Japan, for example, NTT in Japan installs cables, that's fine. But if overseas foreign capitalized companies do this, how would you feel about that? There's the image, there's the image issue, which lingers. Maybe recently, there are people who are concerned about this. Funds are being provided from overseas in order to attract funds. We have, when we think about the power of foreign capitalized companies, can everyone be positive about this? And to be positive about this, what kind of partnering arrangement should we decide on? Anything from you, Ono-san?
ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Come to think of it, as a former overseas fund, I'd like to say something. Well, hot topic. What Ms. Ito said is a hot topic. The purpose of this meeting is how to entice overseas investors' money. Is it okay to receive foreign funds and so forth? So Japan has its legal system. It's a very solid legal system. So first of all, so legally, we can block anything which can have the control. For example, in the case of Stone Peak investors or the public pension funds, it has a very high degree of a public feature. So in the process of global operation, they want to have diversified investment. That's why they want to invest in Japan. So we can sort of dissect the problems of concern or concerns. Thank you.
というからやっぱり一般的な考え方として
Thank you very much. Rather than being concerned, I think there's this general view, and that is my thinking. The fund operation, including this in Japan, the on-the-ground skills and operation skills, that's our strengths, and that's our selling point. And when there is offshoring, people may be concerned. I feel that there's some of that.
おそらく先ほど期待はすごい日本のインフラに対して
There's high expectations towards Japan's infrastructure, but we're not seeing increase in investments. That may become the reason. From the Japanese side, they may fear global money coming in. But the reverse holds true. When global investors come to Japan, more than we expect, from the Western perspective, they may find Japan or the Japanese people as a different world. If I may give you an extreme example, we invite U.S. senior members in Japan to hold meetings in Japan, but regardless of the substance of the meeting, at the end, they all smile and say, "It was very nice meeting you. Thank you for coming," as closing remarks. It sounds as though it was a great meeting. Let's continue these conversations. That's the impression that you would impress on the Americans. Then they asked me, what's the next step? So I said, no, that's not what they wanted to say. They're just saying that as hospitality. So they were saying goodbye. We will probably never see you again. So from the foreigner's perspective, maybe the Japanese culture is difficult to understand. So it works both sides. There are high expectations. Maybe that's one of the reasons we're not seeing much investment.
How about you, Mr. Toyoda? Technologically speaking, Mr. Toyoda has a certain business sector. What is the area that you want to focus going forward? Well, following up from Ono-san, energy field is something where the government is working and the government is committing for renewables and nuclear fusion by 2030, 2040. They want to increase the market size and so forth because of the government commitment. So it's attractive. So I visited yesterday and I witnessed the MOU signing ceremony. Energy situation is well advanced in Europe. Renewable energy by 2040, the objective is already reached by UK now. So it's not limited to Europe. Viewed from the investors, the history that you are accustomed in your own country would be repeated. So it's almost like a time machine business. So I think there are a lot of opportunities available. Well, not talking about, thank you very much, nice meeting you. In the world of energy, the landowners are involved and you have to participate in the local festivals in order to win the hearts of the landowners and so forth. So you don't have the intention of taking over or buying over, but there is an allergy from the local people sometimes. So it's an interesting market.
Ono-san, earlier on, you talked about the 100 billion or injecting a lot of money in Japan, but it's difficult to invest in Japan. In Japan, how do we make Japan attractive to attract investments? And why is it such that it's difficult to channel funds into Japan's infrastructure? Where's the gap? What is lacking? Thank you very much. In that sense, throughout my career, what I've been doing is to overseas investors. I've talked about the attractiveness of Japan and opportunities for investment in Japanese infrastructure. And so it's close to being an interpreter. And what I mentioned earlier, there are cultural differences of the kind that I talked about earlier. And we have to give overseas investors a sense of security in investment in Japan, but there is no mechanism to do that here in Japan. And so we have to advance discussions on that, I think.
Related to that, the government, local municipalities, there are roles to be expected of them. So simply speaking, not only the subsidies, but in order to entice priming impact of inviting foreign funds, we have to have a certain mechanism and the systems. Altera is a fund, climate change fund in UAE. So So there is an anchor investor, the colossal amount of fund is looking toward the emerging countries. So the money is invested in that place. And the fund's reliability is enhanced. And then the institutional investors have the ease of coming into that investment. So it's a priming effect, catalytic capital it is called. It is a pump priming sort of function. So in this Altera, one characteristic is that there is a certain cap placed regarding the profit that they have, and then excess return would be distributed to other investors. That's the mechanism of Altera. So what is that? So there are difficult infrastructure projects, difficult for investment in emerging countries, and the institutional investors find it difficult to go in. But just an extra percentage of return, excess return, is distributed to the investors. So they look into the risk-return balance and they come to investment. I think we can learn a lot from this kind of mechanism. For example, the central government and Tokyo metropolis can introduce such a system by way of creating funds as a catalytic funds. In the case of subsidy, it's only the money, but there is a leverage effect coming from this scheme, and then there can be a big swell of overseas funds coming to the infrastructure works in Japan. Considering them, I would like to ask your views, especially Toyoda-san. I think you have experience with subsidies. Do you have any views?
Thank you very much. Renewable energy. 15 years ago, solar power. It was 3-4-fold expensive than the grid. So unless there's a subsidy framework or support, it would not have penetrated. So that was essential. But more recently, there's overdevelopment of renewable energy. So batteries for the grid is necessary in order to store the excess supply. And framework is necessary. And central government as well as Tokyo Metropolitan Government is engaged in such projects. And Tokyo Metropolitan Government is quite aggressive in providing incentives to such infrastructures, including batteries, in order to increase penetration. But there are still room for improvements. If you receive subsidy, it becomes difficult to receive finance. That's the kind of structure in place. So when it comes to subsidies, in the case of batteries, there's partly the subsidy for the battery itself, but not for the substations. So it becomes rather complex. What's the subsidy ratio? It's difficult to calculate. But anyway, some local governments are quite aggressive in providing such support. And you may know this, but long-term decarbonization power source project is there. Cash flow floor is guaranteed, and the upside is given to the private sector. But if you make money, please pay back to the government. That's the kind of structure. And discussions are underway, which is a very interesting framework. That's my impression.
Ono-san, do you have a comment? Thank you very much, Hattori-san. 2 points I'd like to convey. I think that plan is very interesting. I've actually challenged different things in this country, and my comment is that there's a first mover's advantage. Merits go to the first mover. In Japan, I think Japan is hardest on the first mover. The second mover, there are lots of second movers in Japan. To become the first mover is very difficult here in Japan. And that's the first point. Secondly, all Japan or the nationwide policies and administration moving forward things for people to get together to do things. That kind of mindset is very strong in Japan. And what I want to say is that the Altera's framework that kind of framework, if the government could create such a framework, I think this will have a very good catalytic effect. What I said, there are walls that people find hard to overcome. It's hard to become the first penguin, and so if the government backs us up, this will help. It's not using taxpayers' money. It's a catalyst to input money as the catalyst, and then you bring several hundredfold of money from overseas, and to have overseas investors invest in Japan. If that materializes, I think this will be a very interesting approach.
同じその資金
Similarly, it's fund. It's the same fund, but how you use it and how it is structured depends upon that. Different aspects will come out, and that is the priming effect. And there will be a huge movement from a lot of investors. I think you have to craft something out of mine. Well, this is a rare opportunity. So in front of you, maybe you find it difficult to talk about. But if there are things that you want to ask, maybe difficult to answer. But is there any questions from the panelists? Infrastructure is difficult because it's not one-time only investment. It is an ongoing investment. If the structure is there, or structures are there, but the long-term ongoing investment should be possible. What are the things that have to be crafted? Do you have any ideas about crafting? Any ideas? Come to think of it, I don't know. Maybe you are aware of that. It's really super long-term. But sometimes it so happens that the financial return could become high, and the new asset people come into the picture. Hurdle rate, as well as the 20, 30 years long-term time horizon as the infrastructure. There is a huge gap between the two. The battery power generation is something which would follow in this category. Energy infrastructure, collecting, recovering the investment in 5-10 years, that's not possible. I elaborately explain that. Another important thing is the rules. The rules are often changed. If there are too often a change of rules, investors will find it very difficult to come in. So on the side of the administration, the rules should be made constant. It's very important. Famous story I'd like. It's a photovoltaic and renewable energies would be purchased. This system was created in Europe, and then Spain said that we're going to do it. And then the investors sort of receded, withdrew. Japanese situation is similar to that. In the case of battery business, it's very similar. So consistent system design is necessary.
としてはね、やっぱりそんなのねやってられないみたいなところがあるから、海底ケーブルなんていっぺんなんかね海に入れたらもう25年出てきませんからみたいなところで、やっぱりそれをどう25年先
It's there for 25 years once it's installed on the subsea. So I think it's difficult to have foresight. To add to that, when you look at it as infrastructure, there are infrastructure that ought to be protected versus infrastructure on the offense. And when I say defense, like submarine cables, those are infrastructure that will probably be perpetually used. In the analogy of real estate, the Marunouchi building in front of Tokyo Station, that building will continue to be used. In the form of REIT, they are included in REIT fund. So there are infrastructure and assets that will continue to be used. So we use long-term funds for such assets. But then, for example, there's a cable. You want to upgrade the cable in order to increase the asset value in 5 years' time. So you need to be on the offense. So you need to design a fund that would be appropriate for such purposes. So there has to be some adjustment in order to optimize.
That was a very good intervention. I believe that Japanese infrastructure has a value in terms of scale, quality, and demand. It's there. And so the rest is how overseas investors and funds can be attracted. If we could create a mechanism to do that, I believe there's a lot of potential, and I am convinced about that on hearing your discussion. And through discussions such as this one, I would like to take part in making the mechanism more attractive here in Japan. And I believe it would feed into raising the value for Japan as a whole. Thank you very much for your very interesting discussion. I'd like to conclude here.
Thank you very much.